The film of The Holly and the Ivy originates in Wynyard Browne's stage play, which he'd been working on in the late 1940s and then hits the London stage in 1950. First of all at the Lyric Hammersmith and then transfers to the St Martin's. It has an incredibly long run. It is very well received, and clearly that's what set Anatole de Grunwald on the path to thinking here might be a good money spinner with a transfer to screen. So many of the essential elements of a Christmas film are here. A family with problems to see through. A family that understands that Christmas is a special time. A reverence for tradition. A sense of coming together and resolutions. These are all of the things which a great celebrated Christmas movie like It's a Wonderful Life. This is exactly the heart of arguably the greatest of the Christmas movies. All those elements are there in The Holly and the Ivy, and I think for a lot of people it might be interesting if they could compare and contrast a Hollywood American vision, with this very British, you might say very middle class vision, to see the differences but also the essential similarities.
What do you mean, compassionate?
Well, the Army's very sentimental at Christmas. Hello, David.
Hello, Mick. How did you fix it?
Well, I went to see the Major and pitched a tale. That's one small advantage of being Irish. I told him me mother had died, me father's getting old, and me little sister. Oh, you ought to see me little sister. She's wonderful. She's bravely struggling to keep things going, and she wants us all home this year because maybe it's the last Christmas we'd all spend together in the old home. Worked like magic. Almost swear when I finished with tears in the Major's eyes.
The Holly and the Ivy is a deep reflection of Englishness and its relationship with the rest of the British Isles. You see that in Margaret Halston's character as Aunt Lydia, in the way in which she is dressed. Her sheer wardrobe reflects an English sort of tweediness. Celia Johnson as well. It is set in rural Norfolk. And Norfolk, then as now, known for its glorious 15th century churches, this heart of kind of the English rural idyll, the heart of the genius of English architecture. And it's all summed up in the setting of the Holly and the Ivy. And then we start to see those relationships with the other parts of the United Kingdom and the British Isles. There is the Irish part, that the quite, perhaps the modernised, surprising element of Southern Irish Anglicanism, as is represented in Martin's character as the vicar. And of course his very fiery sister with her extraordinary demeanour, so brilliantly brought to life by Maureen Delaney. And then John Gregson with his gentle Scottish accent. So we get the kind of component parts or parts of the British Isles all coming together at a family festival in deep England, deep rural England of Norfolk at Christmas. I think the main themes are those that had been associated with Christmas really since it started to emerge as a modern festival in the 19th century, which is the family coming together, but often because Christmas as this midwinter festival, as we know, where we're crammed together often with our family, and the old cliche, you can pick your friends but not your family, almost inevitably lead in that claustrophobic condition to people starting to pick on old wounds. So I think that idea of families with the troubles, the strifes that they have, perhaps which have been left not dealt with, not faced up to, but at Christmas in a family festival seem to come to the fore. That's one of the, I'd say, the top great theme. The other one that's running through it is very much a 20th century obsession, which is what is meant to be the spirit of Christmas. Has it become a materialist orgy, or should it be about spiritual reflection on the moment when the Christian religion, was quite literally born? And then I think the third layer is the complex understandings and relationships between Englishness and Britishness.
Are you psychic or what?
Oh, what a delicious Scottish voice. My husband was Scottish, you know, from Argyllshire. And ever since my marriage, I've always felt myself to be Scottish in a way. What part of Scotland do you come from?
Not far from Aberdeen.
And what do you do?
I'm an engineer.
Oh, I'm afraid that means nothing to me.
Middle class values, and middle class culture was so close, and arguably still is so close, to the heart particularly of Englishness. Britain, as the world's first great industrial nation, as the world's first great urbanised nation, was really the first then to throw up an urban white collar middle class, and they became so dominant in English/British culture that really it was their way of looking at the world which began to permeate everyone's understanding. And of course, to a certain extent, if we're thinking about Christmas, and the origins of the modern Christmas, obviously we're going to come back to Charles Dickens, and in many ways most of his novels, and particularly A Christmas Carol, is about middle-class urban characters. Scrooge might be a very miserable example of it and needs to reform, and become a generous middle-class member of society. And of course his clerk, Bob Cratchit, is right on the edge of the middle class and is very keen to maintain his middle class respectability. So Christmas and middle class values, I think, had always gone together, certainly in England, and because, I say, that the sheer size of the middle class in England and Britain had become really the synonym for national culture.
Margaret, what on earth are you doing here? I've just been telling them some darn story about you having flu.
I knew as soon as you were gone I couldn't stand it alone in the flat. Oh, dreary Christmas. When I came in here just now and saw this room again, heard them all talking in there, suddenly felt I couldn't stand this either.
You could almost, if you want to be tongue-in-cheek, do a checklist of Christmas cliches. It starts with them listening to 9 lessons and carols on the wireless from Cambridge. They're putting up decorations. They talk about Christmas customs, and at one point over dinner they even start discussing what the meaning of the verses of the holly and the ivy, what's that all about.
How bitter the holly smells.
Holly? I didn't know it had a smell.
Yes, in the stalks when you break it. It's in the carol, bitter as any gall.
And Mary bore sweet Jesus Christ for to redeem us all.
I always think Christmas is the loveliest of the festivals.
There are so many hints at Christmas traditions, and also varying Christmas traditions. We know that all families have their own little particular variants. And what happens in this one? There is a discussion about whether goose or turkey is a better option for Christmas Day. And of course, being scions of the proper middle class, they want goose.
You'll miss the goose if you go now.
Goose is it you're having, not turkey.
Oh dear, don't you like goose?
I do. I prefer it. Now, I don't know what to do.
Then stay down, Bridget.
So there are lots of ways in which English/British Christmas traditions are being referenced all the way through, and are giving that sense of the ballast, that holds the nation together. This is our true core, and if we stick with these kinds of ideals, we'll be a happy people.
Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me fine Lord hither, now and I will see him die, when the Pagan monarchs, forth they went together.
The way the film is shot, I think, really interestingly layers the English-British thing. So right at the start, when the invitations are being sent out to for the family to join together, we see Celia Johnson putting the little letters and cards into a letterbox set in a red brick wall, in clearly a rural setting. Now, straight away, red brick, I think, for anyone who's got any sense of architecture, will start to think of 18th century Britain, or perhaps as slightly earlier 18th century, kind of Queen Anne visions. And it's obviously rural. It then cuts. We get the London of Clubland, a very deliberate shot of St James's, where Cousin Richard is a member of his gentleman's club. So that has all of those resonances of people like Lord Peter Wimsey, the London clubland of old generals, but also perhaps slightly brighter young things.
You are a lucky old thing, Bogey. You know, I'd give a lot to live in the west of Ireland.
Why don't you come over for Christmas, Dick? We'd love to have you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't.
Oh, what are you up to?
I always do the same thing at Christmas. I go and stay with some cousins of mine called Gregory in Norfolk.
The Holly and the Ivy really does reflect a very late 40s into the early 50s Christmas. We're just on the cusp of Harold Macmillan's You've Never Had It So Good years. This is a Britain that is just beginning to emerge from post-war austerity. You know, and we get that in Reverend Martin's speech. He says something like, Christmas, it isn't what it was and it isn't what it should be. It's something that the brewers and the retailers have got hold of. You know, it's just a festival for selling people things. Now, that had been growing since the late 19th century, but had obviously taken quite a hit, really, during the Second World War, thanks to rationing and then post-war austerity screwing down on that even more tightly. But by the early 50s, there are the first signs that Britain is starting to come out of it and is moving towards a world of mass consumption, essentially the Christmas that we will know today. We also have the comment that cinema, again, Ralph Richardson's character says, cinema speaks more to people than I do in my church giving my sermons on a Sunday. You know, and the Britain of the 50s is a great cinema world of the late 40s and 50s, you know, just massive consumers of films. And of course, ironically, they're making a comment about their own product there. So we see those elements of a world that's just emerged from the Second World War, that's just beginning to bed down into a consumer revolution.
Let's go to the pictures.
Okay, suits me.
Come on then, quick.
You missed the beginning, and I don't suppose the film will be any good anyway.
Never mind, escape. The foundation of all entertainment.
Cut your Keatings, it's a flea fit.
The critics were generally very positive. Some of them, where they were a little on the negative side, felt that a little more could have been done to cinematise it, as it were, that it was a little bit too much of a film stage play. But others fought against that completely and said this is the perfect way to adapt a stage play, the way the camera is used, the cross-cutting from angles and point of view shots.
I've changed.
Maggie, you're not happy, are you?
Who is?
Oh, plenty of people.
Perhaps. If they're stupid enough.
Why must you always crackle like ice?
The genuine exterior shots are mentioned as well, because they were clearly shot on beautiful, clear midwinter days, and you know they crackle with their iciness and frostiness, and that adds a layer. And every critic mentioned the brilliance of the performances. Celia Johnson was picked out. You know, Celia Johnson, someone like Betty Davis, who just did so much through dilating her eyes and moving her eyelashes, and that less is more effect of cinema acting. You really do see how she'd mastered it, I think, in that. The very much upcoming Margaret Leighton as well, and the very young Denholm Elliott was picked out, you know, as a man who was clearly going to become a big film and stage star. And many people also commented on Ralph Richardson. Some said that he'd started almost to overact in films and become too theatrical. You know, the gestures were too big, the things that you could get away with on stage but didn't look so good in cinema. But they picked up that he reined himself in, and actually, although he was playing quite an eccentric character, didn't turn it into a caricature, and that was very much appreciated, as was the fact that two grand dames of the stage in Maureen Delaney and Margaret Houston, as the only survivors from the original stage play, actually made the transition seamlessly. And of course, they brought all of that intrinsic deep knowledge of a long-running production with them. And I think that just floods out of them during the performance, and the critics were really appreciative of that.
Bridget.
Good gracious, how are
Oh, this is nice. We can travel together. Now come in here. There's plenty of room.
you? Is there a corner seat?
Yes, look, you can sit there.
Oh, I'm third class.
Oh, it doesn't matter. We can pay the guard.
Ah, no.
Oh, no, Bridget, we must be together. I'll pay.
No thanks.
Oh, no, but Bridget, you know, really, there's no need.
I prefer it here.
Oh, very well, then. I'll have to come in with you. Porter, just bring my things in here, please, will you?
Christmas is the time for solutions. It might be solutions that arrive only after almost a degree of bloodletting, where an enormous amount of emotion is expended. But because it is the family festival, bar none, and that said, there's a lovely line in it which says, it's Christmas, the family festival, and we've all learnt a thing or two about each other.
It's Christmas, the family festival. We've all learned a thing or two about each other, that's all. Oh, I haven't had time to see Jenny. You must tell her. Perhaps it'll be better for you to tell her anyway. Say that I've had some talk with my father, and everything's quite all right. That last bit's the most important. She'll know what it means.
In the end, the sentiments of Christmas can overcome friction, can overcome argument, can overcome trauma, as has happened to Margaret, brilliantly played by Margaret Leighton in it, who's lost a child through a childhood illness, and she's trying to recover herself, and that's what's led her to drink, and yet eventually facing up to it with her family by her side in a rural Norfolk setting at Christmas, with the virginal whiteness of the world in the deep snow. The world has been made afresh, just as it was on AD 1, as the Christian religion proclaims, the world made anew through the birth of a saviour. So Christmas as a time which deals with problems but then creates resolutions is at the heart of this film.